This was one of the hardest paintings I've ever done. No joke. This painting was incredibly frustrating and hard and soul crushing. But it's so pretty, look at it. But seriously, this was a very tricky painting to do, and I want you to guess at how many times it took me to paint this. Yeah, that's right, 4 times. 4 times. This is 100% one of those trust the process paintings, and even though it was incredibly hard to do, we're gonna break it down. So let's jump into it. I knew the sky was going to be one of those one and done situations, so I wanted to practice it as much as I can. So the first thing I did was take out a very small piece of scrap paper, and I just figured out what colors I wanted. So what yellow, reddish pink, purple, blue, green. Now that I have all my colors, the next thing was to figure out how the paints are going to flow together. So I took out a smaller scrap paper of the arches that I'll be using for the final paper, and I did a quick sketch of just the boats and just the general layout. I made sure the sky was nice and wet before I applied paint. With clean water, I wet the entire sky, and then I took a small round brush and started to add in my rainbow. And before that dries, I took my Payne's gray and diluted it with water to start filling in my sky, making sure the sky is nice and even, and most importantly, blending in with that rainbow gradient. The biggest worry I had was that the sky and the rainbow weren't going to blend, and they would look too segmented and it would look out of place. The whole thing with rainbows is that it magically pops out from the sky. There's no hard lines or anything, so I really wanted the whole sky to just flow. Since this was a commission, they wanted the painting to match the photo, which is 11 by 14. I have 12 by 16 paper, and instead of cutting it out right away and working from the actual size, I like to map it out, draw my 11 by 14 square or rectangle, and then paint on that. That way it allows my paint to go over the edges, and then I don't have to worry about the tape lines on the side. Besides the rainbow, this is overall a relatively pretty busy scene. There's a lot of boats, there's a lot going on. You have like land in the distance, and then you have land farther back. You have all this color going on, all these little lines and everything. So I wanted to simplify the painting and keep pretty much almost all of the design elements from the photo. Even though it's busy, I like a lot of this photograph. I think it really makes for an interesting picture. So I'm trying to keep a lot of it in there, except for I'm just squishing and kind of cleaning up the sides and just compacting it a little more, if that makes sense. I know what you're thinking. Chris, why did you rip it out? Why did you stop? And that's a great question, viewer. For a few reasons, actually. Let's talk about it. First, the sky was too dark. Second, there were spots in my washes. I don't really know how I did that. And 3, the rainbow was so big, why did I make it giant? I don't know what I was thinking, it just kind of like blew up when I like painted it. But anyway, even though I drew every single boat, we're ripping it out and we're starting again because I love this picture and I'm not letting it fail. So let's do it again. Okay, we're back. So we're doing the same exact thing. We're zooming in, we're cropping, and we're just condensing this photo into this painting because I love a lot of it and I want to keep most of it. So anyway, same exact thing from the start, but we're gonna really focus in on this rainbow this time. The wet on wet technique is really tricky because if you add too much water, your paints just blow up and they go everywhere. But if you don't add enough, they just kind of stay where they are and the color can be too saturated and it could be a mess. So you have to find that sweet middle ground. And this time I'm focusing in a lot more on how much water I'm putting down because I want this gradient to just be perfect. No more overthinking. We're gonna start with the 12 round brush, going from one side all the way to the other, making sure not to stop, using enough color. Repeating this process for all the other colors, I'm just really focusing in on going from left to right and keeping it as smooth as possible. Going right up to the last color, making sure that that wet on wet really blends them and does the work for me. I love the colors, but we gotta keep going. We can't let this background dry out. We have to keep it wet on wet. So I'm jumping right in with this Payne's gray and making sure to do a nice smooth wash. But most importantly, I wanna keep that gradient in the sky together in this married way. So when I get up to the rainbow, I'm really going smooth with the Payne's gray and making sure that it blends nice and gently with those colors. And this was the part that I was so stressed about. Forget the boats down below for a minute. The rainbow is the focal point. The rainbow is the painting. And without that nice smooth gradient and glow to it, it can look really choppy and blocky, which is the exact opposite that I want. It's a little hard to see, but in the far back of the photo, there is a strip of land. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking Payne's gray with a little cobalt and just filling in that little strip. Now that it's dry and we are done with the sky, we're gonna leave it alone. We're gonna work on the rest. If the sky was its own problem, the ocean is a whole nother can of worms. Right now, all I'm doing is focusing on the shapes and just the relation to each other, how far apart they are, the sizing, and then all the tiny little boats in the distance we'll forget about for now. We'll add white gouache at the end and paint those. In hindsight, I probably should have worked wet on wet for at least the first layer of this ocean, but it still works. So what I'm doing is I'm adding a quick little swatch of color underneath some of the boats, which is just yellow ochre or cobalt blue. This is not something I see too much in the photo, but I'm using my artistic vision to push this and to find these little reflective colors underneath the boats. I think it adds a lot more to it. And quickly before it dries up on us, we're gonna take the Payne's gray that we made a wash of and start filling in our ocean. Being careful to paint around every single little boat because I don't wanna go in there with gouache and have to find them again. So I'm working quick. It's very deceiving. Sometimes your washes just take forever to dry and then other times they're instantaneous. I don't make it up. It's a sick joke that the watercolor universe gods play on us, but we play with what we got. As I'm moving around the page, I'm just gonna grab some more Payne's gray here and there to just emphasize and push some of the shadow contrast, especially when it comes closer to the viewpoint. And then once that dries, you can always go ahead and add in some ripples and some more texture and stuff to the ocean. But we're gonna let that dry. I'm gonna use some cadmium yellow and cobalt blue, and we're gonna go ahead and paint these islands. Stupid fly. Got it. You're an artist, this is your painting. Feel free to move things around. Whatever you think works better or doesn't work, change whatever you think needs to be changed. Remember to keep looking at the overall composition because everything plays a part. This is kind of what I was talking about, cropping in and condensing the photo, but keeping a lot of it. Now here's the fun part of adding all the tiny baby boats. I'm using white gouache and a small round brush, and I'm just dancing around page, kind of adding little blobs for the very far boats, not really focusing in on a certain shape. And then I'm gonna add a little line coming up for the mass of it. Mast? I don't know. But yeah, pretty much the farthest little boats you see are just kind of a dot with a little line coming up of it. As I'm getting closer to the viewer, I'm making them more of a boat shape with some more lines, and I'm occasionally adding in some yellow ochre, some Payne's gray, or some cobalt blue, just to give some variety so it's not just pure white gouache. Remember, we're basically magicians when we paint. Our eyes are gonna see those very far away dots, and it's just gonna immediately translate them as boats. So don't get caught up on little details and little shapes. The viewer's eye does a lot of the work. Watercolors are tricky, and it sounds kind of dumb, but you really have to figure out how they work and how they flow. There's a lot of natural movements to the watercolor, and you just have to spend time basically with them to figure it out. Especially when you're doing a wet on wet technique like this, you need to know how much water to put down, how fast does it dry, how fast do the paints move, how saturated some colors are with a certain amount of water. There's a lot of variables, there's a lot of things going into it, and you have to balance all of that while working relatively quick, because it's going to dry. If we forget the boats down below for a second, my biggest stress for this painting was the sky. I did not want this rainbow to overpower. I didn't want it to look blocky. I wanted everything to flow nice and smooth. There was just something off about this rainbow, and I think it was this one little yellow section. So I'm gonna use yellow pastel to just give it a little life and a little more saturation. Then we're gonna take it over to the workbench and trim it up. Don't forget to sign it, and then a nice pretty review. One, two, three, four, boom. That's the final painting. Super happy with it. Think it came out great. I learned a lot from it. I hope you learned a lot from me talking about learning a lot from it, if that made sense. Thank you for watching me paint this beautiful rainbow and listening to me ramble on about things that may or may not make sense. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next adventure.